Welcome to Lead Well, Live Whole. I'm your host, Michael Sirmon. Every episode, we'll spend a few minutes exploring the challenges, questions, and realities of everyday life, because success means little if you lose yourself in the process. So take a breath, settle in, and let's spend a few minutes exploring life together. What if I told you that the best leader you've ever known probably wasn't the loudest, probably wasn't the smartest, and they probably weren't even the most charismatic? And I can tell you with surety, they certainly weren't the most intimidating. Yet somehow, people trusted them. People wanted to follow them. People became better simply because they were around. But have you ever wondered why? Was it their personality, their experience, their position? Or was it something much deeper? Today I want to suggest something that has changed the way I think about leadership. World-class leadership isn't built from techniques, it's built from identity. Because when the leader is secure, clarity replaces confusion. Curiosity replaces control. Service replaces ego. And people? Well, the people flourish. So today, let's look at the anatomy of a world-class leader. Welcome back to the Lead Well, Live Whole podcast. I'm Michael Sirmon. Every week we explore practical ideas to help you think clearly, lead confidently, develop others, and live whole. Over the past few episodes, we've talked about something that isn't usually discussed in leadership circles. We've talked about identity. We've talked about overthinking. We've talked about the stories we tell ourselves. We've talked about why we're often harder on ourselves than anyone else. And these weren't just personal development episodes. These were actually leadership episodes. Because you never lead only with your skills. You always lead from the condition of your heart. And today I'd like to build on that foundation. I want to talk about what a healthy leader actually looks like. Not a perfect leader, not a celebrity leader, not a leader with the biggest title, but the kind of leader people remember years later because they made everyone around them better. And it starts on the inside. We've spent a tremendous amount of time teaching leadership skills, strategic planning, communication, conflict resolution, financial management, delegation, performance reviews. And while all of those matter, but I've learned that after more than 30 years of leading people, I've learned that skills can determine what you can do, but character determines how you do it. And security determines whether people will want to follow you. Think about the leaders who changed your life. Was it because they always had the perfect answer? Probably not. Was it because they never made mistakes? Definitely not. But it was because you trusted them. You knew where they stood. You may have said it something like, I know their heart, right? You didn't have to wonder if they were protecting themselves. You didn't have to compete for their approval. You could simply grow. That's what secure leadership creates. It creates psychological safety before psychological safety became a buzzword. So what actually makes a leader like that? Right? Let's perform an anatomy lesson, right? Not on the body, but on the heart of a great leader. Let's start with the mind, right? A world-class leader has a disciplined mind. They think before they react. They ask questions before making assumptions. They separate feelings from facts. And when pressure increases, they slow their thinking instead of speeding it up. Now, that's not weakness, that's wisdom. Secure leaders don't confuse urgency with importance. Now let's talk about the eyes, right? Great leaders see people differently. Where others see problems, they see possibilities. Where others see weaknesses, they see potential. Where others see employees, they see human beings. Right? People often rise or fall to the level of what's expected of them. And world-class leaders choose to see what someone can become, not just who they are today. I've told you many times, right? One of the greatest leaders I've ever had was a gentleman named Scott Pryor. And one of the lessons Scott gave me has stuck with me for years, for decades. And that is, no matter what business you're in the people business. And if you take care of the people will take care of the business. And that's true. That was true then. It's true today. It's true in every organization I've seen, whether it's in a profit, a nonprofit, a public, whatever the setting may be. That is still true. It's about the people. Now, let's look at the ears. Secure leaders listen, right? Not just to reload and not to defend, not to win, but to understand. Have you ever noticed that the strongest people in the room often ask the most questions? And that's not accidental. Curiosity is confidence in action, right? There's nothing more frustrating than being called to to a superior's office or someone up the chain's office and being asked questions, but they don't really want to hear your answers. They called you so that they could tell you their view, their opinion, their stance, right? There was zero curiosity. There was zero ears willing to listen. How did that kind of leader make you feel? Did you walk away saying, ooh, I'm better for that? Or did you walk away saying, what a jerk? So next, let's talk about the voice, right? The voice of a world-class leader builds, right? Now, that doesn't mean that they avoid difficult conversations, but it's quite the opposite. In those difficult conversations, they tell the truth, but they tell the truth with dignity. They speak correction without humiliation, accountability without shame, encouragement without manipulation. People leave conversations clearer, not smaller. I was recently talking to a friend who had to go talk to the CEO of their company. And afterwards I said, well, how did it go, right? Because he had brought some things to the CEO. He said, well, it was a normal meeting. I was mostly just him insulting me. Okay, that's not the leader. In fact, that's not a leader, right? That's somebody with a title that nobody really wants to follow. And the first person that comes along that will actually pay them more or pay enough to get away, people are going to flee. People are going to run. And that type of leader, unfortunately, looks at people leaving as they're weak, right? They just didn't have the strength to stand. They weren't able to stand and fight me. One thing you should never have to do is fight your leader, because it's about the heart, right? That is the most important part of a world-class leader. Secure leaders genuinely want others to succeed, right? They don't secretly compete or secretly compare or hold stuff back so that people will fail or so that people will falter so they can say, aha, look, I told you, right? Because they don't feel threatened by someone else's talent. They don't feel threatened by someone else's personality. They don't feel threatened by someone else's popularity, right? They don't have to be the hero in every story, because they understand something extremely profound, that leadership isn't about being the most important person in the room. It's about making everyone else more valuable because you were there. And next it comes to the hands, right? Watch what great leaders do. They're constantly lifting. They're constantly teaching, they're coaching, they're delegating, they're opening doors, they're removing obstacles, they're developing confidence. They aren't building followers. They aren't building or collecting people to them that will just yes everything that they say and tell them how wonderful and how great they are. They're building leaders. They're building people who can step up and own because they understand the intent and the heart of the mission of the organization, and they surround themselves with leaders that they can trust to step up and carry that mission forward. And part of that really is because they have a backbone, right? Kindness is not weakness. Compassion isn't compromise. World-class leaders, secure leaders, they make hard decisions. They have hard conversations. They protect the standards and they keep their commitments, but they do it without losing their humanity. Because, in our world, for some reason, we think strength and gentleness are opposites, but they're not. The strongest people actually possess both. If you have all the strength in the world and the position, and you use that to beat people down, you're not strong. You're not a leader. You're a bully. And finally, watch where secure and world-class leaders walk. They move toward the problem. They move toward conversations. They move toward responsibility. They move toward people. Because secure leaders know that avoiding discomfort today always creates greater discomfort tomorrow. They know that refusing to move forward and pay the price today is going to cost them more tomorrow. So when you step back and you look, you begin to notice something. Right? None of the characteristics that we talked about today depend on charisma. None of them require a corner office. None require extraordinary intelligence. In fact, they don't even require you to be in business. They can be anywhere you're at, any organization, any church, any club, in your home, right? These characteristics are available to every one of us because they're not really leadership skills if you think about it. They're expressions of a secure heart. And perhaps that's why leadership isn't ultimately about influence. It's really about stewardship. It's about becoming the kind of person who leaves every room healthier than when they entered it. Every meeting, every family dinner, every coaching conversation, every friendship, every organization. Because leadership isn't measured by how many people follow you. It's measured by how many people become stronger because you led them. So this week, don't try to become a more impressive leader. Become a more secure one. Choose one part of this anatomy lesson that resonated with you. Maybe it's listening. Maybe it's courage. Maybe it's seeing potential. Maybe it's developing others. And practice it with intentionality this week. And watch what happens. Not only to the people around you, but inside you. So if today's episode encouraged you, I hope you'll subscribe, follow, and share it with someone who wants to lead well at work, at home, and everywhere in between. And you can also find more leadership resources, coaching opportunities, articles, and books at michaelsirmon.com. So until next time, think clearly, lead confidently, develop others, and live whole. If today's conversation raised a question you've been wrestling with, I'd love to help. I offer one-on-one coaching for individuals navigating pressure, transition, and important decisions. You can learn more at michaelsirmon.com.